Hello, everyone watching on YouTube and listening on Spotify. It's another episode of NRG Insights. For those that don't know, we speak to influential people within the mortgage and specialist lending market who can offer, as the podcast suggests, some insights into the market. Today, I've got Nick Hilton, who is the MD of Glenhawk. Thanks for joining me, Nick.
Good to see you, mate. Good to see you.
Oh, it's much
Had a good
better.
time in Miffin together, didn't we, a few
We
weeks
did
ago?
indeed, yes. Well, we'll talk about that. The kind of the relation. We call that relationship building.
Sure.
So for those that don't know, tell me about your financial services journey up
Okay.
to where you are now as MD of Glenhawk.
Yeah, sure. So quite a sort of unusual journey in terms of I'm one of those sort of typical people that really did fall into it. I was sort of early to mid 20s. I didn't go down the uni route. Sort of did a bit of college here and there, but didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I think sort of got to my mid 20s and knew I wanted to sort of start something new. So that was the kind of start of my financial career. And I actually got a job within an asset management firm, fairly small, fairly boutique, that raised money for high net worth via high net worth investors, ultra high net worth. And those funds were invested within collective investment vehicles. And essentially, that was linked to bridging. So I am one of those people that certainly didn't wake up and think, I want to be in the bridging industry. It was literally thrown on me. And to be honest, I've done a various number of roles since then that are all bridging linked, but not necessarily as a direct lender as I am now.
How interesting! You said that in 2008. Was that a weird time to go into any sort of financial?
So
market? Or did you not feel it because you weren't in it before?
100%. You're right. And I think I was actually really lucky with the timing because actually back then bridging had a bit of a stigma to it, certainly. There was far fewer lenders. I think there's sort of 195 odd lenders now. And I think at the time there was probably only sort of 4 or 5, 2 or 3 sort of main players.
Yeah.
And it was extremely expensive. You only really lent to sort of either real high net worth or people with really bad credit that couldn't raise money from the banks and the high street banks. And obviously the crash 2008, 2009 was really where bridging really sort of came out. It was the one sort of industry that really started thriving because high street banks weren't lending, private banks weren't interested, and that short-term risk wasn't really something that people wanted to take on board. So that was kind of the initial evolution of where bridging came from. There are there's lots of guys in the industry that worked sort of early, mid-2000s in it, but it was slightly different. It was structured differently. Again, a little bit more loan sharky as opposed to what it is now, which is a mainstream product within the mortgage cycle.
We'll talk about that later, actually, about the stigma behind it, because it does take a while for people to understand it's not a bad product. I think, especially for brokers, I think if they don't get it, they think it's for people that can't get a term mortgage or something like that. It's a strange stigma to it.
It's changed so much, and I feel like I've sort of almost been part of that whole journey, but it's given me huge opportunities all the way through. So if we go back to 2008, 2009, it was asset finance. And actually I, as part of one of the companies, used to fund one of the old bigger bridging lenders that actually ended up sort of unfolding and due to a number of different reasons, which I won't go into too much detail. And that's actually funny enough where I met Phil Mabb. So Phil was my first sort of mentor, the one other guy that isn't really so prominent in the industry, but does work within the industry still, raising money, but probably isn't as well known, a guy called James Allen. But I also worked with Phil on an asset wind down, and that was sort of 2011, 2012, but that was all linked to that asset management company and how that sort of went bad, and then it was about a 150, 200 million pound asset wind down. So when I refer to how lucky I was thrown in the deep end as a junior, and I was doing things that a lot of people in my position generally wouldn't have had the opportunity to do. And so, you talk about that sort of throwing yourself in the deep end, and that was exactly what happened with me. And, I did my best. I worked really hard. I was very driven because, of course, I found something that I really enjoyed and something that I was relatively good at the time, as far as I thought. So I was pretty green and probably made a million wrong decisions, but kind of was forced to make those decisions, actually. I go back to Phil's relationship. Phil was brilliant because he's very disciplined, knows bridging and development inside out as a lender, as a broker as well. Yeah. And so very sort of multifaceted, knows the front end, knows the back end, knows how to lend on development finance, and knew everything. So he was my sort of core bridging mentor. And yeah, so I worked for this investment company from 2008 through to 2012 when it kind of started unraveling, i.e. not so much with us, but with the lender, one of the big lenders that we worked with at the time. And that was when I moved into the wind down stage. And so we did that for a sort of year or two, and actually was contracted into that for a long time via some of the big UK London lawyers. And that was a huge eye-opener and probably, again, another story within itself. But over time, that led me to sort of into the investment side via a stockbroking firm where some regulated investment collective property schemes were put together. And actually, we had three bridging lenders at that point. And one of those was Paul Mumford at Century. And so we did that for a year or two, but it didn't really take off how we wanted it to take off. And so that was really the evolution into Paul coming to me and saying, look, do you fancy coming over and doing direct lending? Yeah. I think that was back in 2013. And yeah, that's when I sort of jumped ship from the investment side or the asset wind down side into the sort of...
And you worked with Paul for a number of years, right?
I did, for about 4 or 5. Still, obviously, we still catch up now and then. And my partner, Guy, is, fairly good friends with Paul as well now. So, yeah, I worked for him for about 4 or 5 years, I think. Still see him knocking about, of course.
Yeah. And I'll go through this about kind of people that have shaped their career. I'm right in saying that Paul was one of those, right? That you talked
100%.
I just want to touch on this because I think it's really important for maybe younger people watching, because we talked about this when we were in MIPIM actually about you would feel like you were lucky with the opportunities, but actually you worked really hard and you took every opportunity. So you learned every aspect of every job that you've been in. You wanted to learn more. You wanted to sit next to someone who wanted to learn. And I mean, that's actually when we got talking and said you need to kind of come and discuss that kind of thing. It's so true, isn't it? How your career did flourish, but you had to take every opportunity, right?
Yeah, look, I there's an argument to say, because I was in my 20s, I go back to what I was saying. I had a great time, really great fun, but I was a little bit lost. I would say my self-esteem wasn't very good because I didn't have direction. And a lot of people that go to college, go to uni, they come out. I'm not saying they know what they're going to do, but at least they have the qualifications to get a foot in the door. And I didn't have that. So for me, it was really from starting from scratch. So you can imagine when you're feeling that way, and then you finally get an opportunity, you grab it with both hands. And I feel like a lot of my success in terms of where I am today with Glenhawk and on the back of working with Paul at Century, I think if I hadn't been in that situation, I probably wouldn't be where I am now, because I was always hungrier. I always worked harder. I used to get in earlier. I used to stay later. And all those little things I tried to sort of translate over to the guys now. If I go out for a drink or for some lunch with one of my team members, whether that's an underwriter or internal sales or even compliance, finance, treasury, I always talk about that story. And I think there's a big message of, it can happen. A career can happen in any way, and it's an evolution of time. It's not. Yeah. It doesn't mean you're doing something right or wrong. And you know what? Most people look into the future and say, "Where would I be in 5 years?" I bet you end up nowhere near. I mean, I'm not saying you wouldn't in terms of success. I mean, your direction.
No, you're right though. Yeah, just things happen, don't they? But like we were saying before, that you have to grab those opportunities as well. You can't just sit and do your job and expect everything to fall in your lap.
No, exactly. And I did that, to be fair. And does it come with a bit of luck needed? Yeah, it does. Everyone needs a bit of luck in a career. And so, I went from asset management to sort of private high net worth funding to direct lending. And it was all in the space of about sort of 6 or 7 years. But it was a natural progression for me. And, I had my doubts about going into the direct lending space. Was I going to be able to do it? Even at that point, I wouldn't say my confidence was, sky high. Obviously I'd had some great experience and met some great people in terms of mentors. But that's where Paul really came in, and Paul sort of gave me, again, Paul's one of these guys that lets you get on with it. And obviously he saw something in me and trusted me. And, we had a brilliant 4 or 5 years together, and we built that book up. And quite frankly, when the Glenhawk opportunity came across and I met Guy, probably the only difference between the two is that Paul at the time was working in a more boutique-y type
Space, yeah.
part of the space, and I just felt my personality is better in a slightly more mainstream space,
Yeah.
and that's all it is. It wasn't.
Yeah,
I learned
yeah.
a huge amount from Paul, met a huge amount of people, and I have an awful lot to thank him for, to be honest.
Well, talk to me about that, Nick. So, how did that opportunity come about with Glenhawk then? Because obviously,
Yeah.
you and Guy now, you've got a thriving business, but it had to be an initial conversation, right? Everything starts with
Yeah.
that.
We always laugh about this because he didn't like me when we first met. I don't think he liked me. I think so I'm quite loud and quite in your face, and I don't think he probably envisaged as a leader for his new company it was going to be someone like me, to be honest. We met in a bar on Dover Street, and we had a quick drink. We had a bit of a chat, but I have to be honest, at that point, I was happy. I loved working at Century, and I worked with some brilliant people, and I was working in London, and I was enjoying it. I had a freedom, I was learning. And then I think a couple of weeks later, for some reason, I still don't know. We discussed this as well in terms of why I did this. I messaged him. I said, how are things coming along? And he said, yeah, okay. I've got this investor that wants to come on board, and I don't really know. I'm not really sure what to do next. I said, well, why don't we just catch up one more time, have a beer? And I actually spent over the weekend time breaking it down in terms of what he needs to do. So I think if you're coming into a space, because Guy's background is development. Guy's a serial entrepreneur, but he's not. At that point in time, he had borrowed a lot from bridging lenders, but he hadn't worked as a lender as such. He has huge property experience, certainly, especially prime London, and similar to Paul, actually. That's why they get on, I think.
And obviously, business savvy side of things.
And they're entrepreneurs.
Not the technical.
Similar natures in certain areas. They're very different people, but they certainly have characteristics that match each other. Yeah. And I met him the second time, and I sort of broke it all down. And he was like, "Why have you done this for me?" And I was like, "I'm not really sure. I just thought I could see what you wanted to do. I had enough experience to be able to guide, but I genuinely didn't do it thinking, oh, me and Guy are going to build Glenhawk. I did it because I just thought it was a nice thing to do for someone who was starting new in the industry.
And it's interesting as well, right? To share knowledge. To share your knowledge it's probably quite fun to do it. It's just you're looking at how someone builds a business again. It's probably quite an interesting project for you, even before actually thinking you're going to be part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I honestly, I genuinely didn't think that I was going to move off and do that. But and then that really triggered the conversation because he was like, "I can't believe you've done this for me. Like, what? I don't really understand what's in it for you, sort of thing." I'm like, "No, you don't."
That's like going above and beyond thing again. How lucky you are to go. It's doing stuff extra. Like it's not rocket science. Your whole career has been built on. People, doing good things for people, pushing yourself.
Exactly, and so he reached out to me and he sort of said, "Look, I've got this opportunity. I'd like you to come in." It was a bit of a risk for me, to be honest, because I was very
stable. You've been building something, haven't you? You've been like.
I was very stable with Paul and had a good team, was doing well, and I guess the risk was going to somewhere where it may have fallen apart within the first few months, and I'm back to square one. I've got to find another Century type, which I guess could have been difficult for me. So it was, but I spoke to a few people, and it was like, what, you're at that time, you're younger. It's like you've got nothing to lose. If you get a feeling that maybe it's the right move for you. And I thought, what have I got to lose here? I'll give it a shot. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. And here we are, 8 years later, 60 staff, 400 million under management. And don't get me wrong, it's been extremely challenging. It's been difficult. We've had
the highlight bits. There you go.
Yeah, We've had COVID. We've had obviously the war. We've had
economics.
We've had the market in the last 18 months. So it's not been easy. And it's funny because this has obviously got bigger to a point where, for 60 odd staff, where I haven't led something of this size before. And actually the sort of growing pains of a business, it's like what you experience as a smaller boutique type is not the same as what you experience when you're bigger. Yeah. Yet there's loads of pros and cons to both.
And do you feel like you're constantly learning as well? Because I say this, every time you get above a point that you've never been before, it's kind of guesswork for everyone, right? You haven't done it. So it's you're always having to learn the new parts of the business.
Yeah, and look, I think look, life's got a good way of sort of building you up and then knocking
Yeah.
you down again. You know, I
Nailed
don't
it.
think,
Boom.
yeah, exactly. So I don't think for a second that, look, I've got a lot of business experience now. So there's so many things I've learned that I'm still learning, you know, from the funding side of things, the treasury side of things, um, just the economics of a business and how it works and all those sort of things, which I had glimpses of and did with Paul, but Paul very much was the
Yeah.
man for that, really, because it's Paul's baby ultimately.
Yeah.
Whereas I guess Guy and I have been on that journey together, and obviously we brought in some brilliant partners. You know, CFO, and my COO, two brilliant execs that work with us. But we've had to sort of navigate that as we go and learn. And so there's been huge headwinds. And, you know, I tell you, managing 60 staff is not easy. It's not easy, you know, and I think anyone who has a big business will know and will understand that, because it comes with loads of different issues. But at the same time, you know, I'm a pretty positive, glass half full time type of person, really. And,
Yeah.
you know, you just have to deal with problems one by one and move on to the next.
The issue with the problems of having so many staff is that it's not your core business, right? Your core business is getting money out the door. So
Yeah.
also all the other things you have to deal with as a business that aren't the money generating bit is I find the tricky bit. I find that's the reason that people aren't up for it, because we're all very good at our individual job, but actually it's all the shit we have to do in between.
Yeah, and it's groups of
Our job.
people. It's different friendship groups. It's different levels. It's, you know, one thing I always say is everyone wants progress, right? Most people want progress, but when you have a business, you can't have, not everyone can progress all the time. Otherwise, you'd constantly be backfilling, and and that's the
Which I'm
balance.
happy with.
Well, no, exactly, and that's the balance about new business and, you know, sustainability of a business in a bad market. You know,
Do you know what? I had to go through that, because is that like
yeah.
it's a bit of a tightrope for you guys as well, because you're right. Progression is number one in the top three things, and when people are looking to move or looking to stay with the business, but not everyone can have it all the time. So how do you make sure you keep everyone sweet without bullshitting everyone, or how do you make sure that people still have some form of progression, even though, like you say, you can't just keep promoting everyone every year, despite in some companies that like everyone is a director.
Yeah, you can't.
Yeah.
Yeah, and look, it's not easy, if I'm honest, and some you can't. You know, one of our girls left a few days ago, not because she wanted to leave, but because the way the business is structured now, and we've done a lot of changes in terms of streamlining it to make it work better for us, which you have to do. You have to adapt in businesses all the time. You can't sit still. Guy's a big believer of that anyway, and always has been. But she didn't want to leave, but there was an opportunity to do something that we can't offer right now. And I'm always very, I always get behind people if they choose to leave. I think early on in their business, when someone left, it was like, oh my God, this is so bad. But
Possible, yeah.
you get so used to it, and you get used to people coming in and people going. And quite frankly, as long as you support people in the right way, which I think is what you need to do,
Yeah.
you know, there's obviously some constraints with that, and, you know, it's got to work for the business. The business has to come first, but I'm always very supportive of people moving on if that's what they want to do, because quite frankly, if you don't want to work for me, or you can't, then I don't.
We do get businesses who kind of force people to stay, which then becomes toxic, right? Everyone.
Well, of course it does.
Like I said, I wouldn't want anyone in my business that doesn't want to be there. I want them to love it. I want them to get it and want to be part of the vision.
Same. And Guy and I, you know, the one thing with Glenhawk, I think that's, I would say is fairly recognised in the business, in the industry, is our culture. I think our culture has always been the same. It's always been very on the front foot about the people. I mean, you've only got to look at our retention of staff levels is extremely high. I mean, you've got probably over half the business that are sort of 4 or 5 years, you know, so, and that's a lot. So we don't have a revolving door. Don't get me wrong. People join, people leave, and that's natural within any business. But we've always had that.
Because people will see people leave at the moment, but you're at 60. Say your retention is 90%, which is incredible when there's 10 of you. It's always going to look worse when you're a bigger business.
Of course.
It's the same retention rate, and 90% is still absolutely amazing, by the way.
I don't think I don't think many people have left us for lack of opportunity. There's always going to be a few, because again, I go back to that structure and saying, look, the business has to work like that for us.
Yeah. If you don't fit in that in your growth plans, there's nothing you can't like.
Well, exactly, and I think something I've not something I've necessarily realised lately, but what you can't do is look at an individual and say, I've got to make that person fit because I like that person. You've got to say, what does the business look like and who fits into those roles? You can't tailor a business around individuals because,
That's really interesting because
yeah,
I'm a big believer in finding great people and then working out where they sit on the bus. But you're right, I suppose. It's still got to fit in with the business, right? You still got to fit in with the model. Like it can't just be full of great people that aren't doing the job you need to do.
well, I give a good example of this. You know, we've got sort of 7 underwriters and we've got, say, 3 or 4 case managers. If all those 4 case managers want to become an underwriter,
In the next 6 months,
yeah,
yeah,
I would then end up with 11 underwriters and no case managers, right? So then how do you fix that? Oh, we'll bring in another 4 case managers. So then you've got 11 underwriters and 4 case managers. So you're adding on to your costs, your op costs. So again, all of this impacts the wider business, you know, and it's about, you have to be as efficient as you can be. And I think we've learned a lot from that. And like I say, I go back to the girl that's left very recently. She's absolutely brilliant. She's loved within the team. She's worked so hard. She's been excellent, but it just wasn't quite fitting right now because we can't give her the opportunity. And I'd never want someone to stay thinking they haven't got an opportunity. I'd rather they went and tried something new. And also remember, you can always loop back round again. If you've got good relationship with people can go and get experience elsewhere and then come back in a few years, you know. You do see that from time to time. So,
you know what, I do think that has been as well, not just because we're mates and not blowing smoke out your ass, but you do tend to get good levers where you are because you do, you help them, right? And they're generally good. It's from a good place, but that you do need that for culture-wise as well. Like if everyone's slacking, you know, we all know the businesses out there that everyone leaves and everyone's got a problem and it's constant. Like it's hard to recruit for those people as well in the future. You know, it's difficult to try and persuade someone they're not like that.
And I think because again I go back to my journey because I was so lucky with the people I work with, the mentors that I work with, the people that I work with in all the different areas that I end up covering off. It's made me want to repay that in many ways as well. So I've got a very good relationship with pretty much everyone actually at Glenhawk. You know, I'm very much on the ground. I would say more so than the other execs. You know, the execs are.
Is that just your leadership style, or just your personality that you are
both
better being around the people? Yeah, do you think that's
both? I'm pretty young at heart as well. I would say, to be honest, as you probably. You know, I wake up. I'm a very positive person, so I wake up generally with a smile on my face. Let's go, you know. And I like to sort of transpose that onto the young guys. So I spend a lot of time with the young guys in our business. And when I say young, I'm talking sort of 25 up to sort of early 30s or whatever. So I spend a lot of time with them, sounding them out, and I try to listen to them. You know, if they want to, I want them to think that I'm approachable. Now, look, all these things come with positives and negatives. I'm not someone who sit there and say, listen. Some people would say, oh, you know, you need to keep your distance from these people. You know, everyone's got a style, and again, it's not a right or wrong. I like to do it that way. It's where I feel comfortable. I like to have the door open type attitude. And to be fair, Guy's very much like that as well. He's not on the ground as much as me, obviously, because mine's a more of an operational type role because I look after the front end, the sales, the lending, and all that sort of stuff. Whereas he's the entrepreneur, looks after the branding, the marketing, the wider business. I guess we have 2 very different roles.
We did laugh about this, didn't we? About if you had to flip roles, you'd be like, I don't even know what colour.
I'm useless. The only thing you could put me in that's worse than branding is IT. Because I could
we found that this morning.
You know already because I'm 10 minutes late for this because I couldn't get my computer working. So I heavily believe in investing in the people and treating them respectfully as a friend and not as the boss. I don't really like that. And one thing you will say is if you speak to the guys that work for me, they know I am the boss. So I think I
was going to say that. Sorry, my plug's just gone unplugged. I don't want to lose you. I was going to say that there's still got to be an aspect of, you know, when shit goes wrong or or when people need to be told, they still understand that you're the managing director of a big business that's turning over lots of money. You got that serious element to you, but I don't think that doesn't mean you have to be serious all the time.
Oh, 100%. And I can assure you, I take my job and my career, my business extremely seriously. And I think, my voice probably echoes across that floor as it does at home, as it does everywhere, in the pub, wherever I am, every day. And I think some people probably get sick to death of it, but they probably get used to it because I like that every day. And that's the energy I want to bring to a business. I'm extremely passionate about what I do.
And it does come across as well. It's not like you can't bullshit passion. I said this to you before. You can't bullshit energy. You know what I mean? Like when the way you talk about the business is very passionate, very energetic, and hopefully that comes across, especially to the younger guys as well, because there's nothing worse than walking into an office and it's a bit low and everyone's, just makes it work tougher. Yeah,
absolutely. And look, I mean, sometimes it gets too loud. Like, right, guys, can we actually do some work? But look, I still wouldn't change it because the philosophy behind it is if people are happy and motivated and energized and driven, then they will work hard for you and they will respect that. And we have a load of fun at Glenhawk. You walk into our office, everyone's laughing. It's very positive. It's not perfect, and we all make mistakes, but that is something that I wouldn't want to change. I really wouldn't, because it's part of our identity and it's what we've built. And I go back to the retention of staff. A lot of people have been there for, even the young guys, 4 or 5 years. And if you look at like career cycles, you do 2-3 years and you move on. We're not seeing that.
Average 10 years, something like 1.8 years or something crazy like that.
Well, exactly. We're probably, I wouldn't take a guess, probably 3.5 years or something like that. There's very few people come in and go. In fact, I can't think of one that came in. This isn't really for me. But do you know what? Actually, though, Marcus, so when it comes to the interview process, what I'm looking for in a person are those things. Yeah. So I for someone that didn't go to uni and didn't do a lot of college and wasn't hugely academic, so why would I look for someone like that? Because that's not the way I came through. And to be fair, Guy was the same. Guy wasn't hugely academic. He was an entrepreneur, starting businesses from his garden shed at 14 type. So, so when I'm looking for someone, I'm looking for, don't get me wrong, you want them to be good at what they do, but I'm looking for spirit. I'm looking for the energy, for the passion, the hunger to want to do well. And that for me is, and the personality, are people going to warm to them? Is there a likability factor? And that's honestly
I honestly think likability factor gets missed out on because you can't see it in a CV. But I said this before, especially, not to pigeonhole everyone, but especially with salespeople, like people want to pick up the phone when you're phoning them.
Of course.
I think we talked about that before, about actually some of the best BDMs, but even internally, externally, are really good because people want to talk to them because they're like, I like that guy. They'll give you the time of day, and actually they want you. Guy said something to me actually really recently, and he said, we actually want you to succeed. Forgetting about what we do with you, as in my business. He goes, I want to see you succeed because I like you. And I thought, you can't forget that actually, that other people not just want to work with you because you're good at your job, but really want you to succeed because you like each other, And I think that's how we get missed out.
I've got, obviously within this industry, I've got a lot of great mates. A lot of them own their own brokerages, and they're all sort of fairly young guys, young girls, or whatever that built this up themselves and built their businesses up, and they're great friends, and we do a lot of business together as well. And absolutely, I want them to succeed and do well, and that's why I don't get sentimental about losing deals and I've used this. It is what it is, it's business. So you can still have the friendship, but business is business ultimately.
Do you think that's something you've learned over the years? Because I used to be quite, when you start out, things do feel personal because it's kind of your baby, but then you realise it is a money generating machine that you work in.
Yeah.
So it becomes a little bit less personal to you, or have you found that? Have you gone?
Well, I don't know.
I tell you where it comes from is I don't think we should call our
personal. Everything's personal. But I think when you Glenhawk or bridging or lending isn't work for me. It's from the second I got in 2008. It's been my life,
Yeah.
and it's not. I've never seen this. I've never seen this job or any of the jobs leading up to this as a 9 to 5 ever,
Yeah.
because I live and breathe it actually, and I love it. And I love the energy, again, going back to the energy, even just within the industry. I mean, look, go back to MIPIM. So much fun, but also
great.
meet so many great people. But also it's building existing, it's sort of cementing existing relationships and obviously building new ones. And yeah, I just think it's a really, I say to a lot of the young guys that work for me, we're so lucky to work in this industry, I think there's a lot of real cutthroat industries out there, working for some of the big corporates where, you are simply a cog in a wheel, and I wouldn't want anyone to feel that they were a cog in a wheel within our business. I
Do you
want
think
them
people
to
know
make
that?
an impact.
Do you think if this is your first industry you've been in, like I say this to youngsters, they're like, you're actually really blessed to be around these people, youngsters, sound like an old man, but you know what I mean? Like you're really blessed to be in this industry and you're really blessed to be around these people because it's a really good industry to learn and people are happy to, and you don't know because if this is the only thing you've ever done, you just think, oh, this is okay. You're like, we're very privileged to be in the position we're in the industry we're in, right?
Yeah, look, it's a, obviously the business is business and it's hard, but it's a lucrative industry as well. So, you can come in and you can build a really solid career and you can earn some good money, as well. And look, we talk about financial stability is as important as mental stability and, having that fun and passion as well. We're all here to obviously make money as well at the same time. So, it's I think that says it all because the guys that work for us continue to work for us. And if they don't, very few people come into this industry and leave it.
Yeah.
Because if you're experienced in it and you're good at what you do, 99 out of 100 would enjoy it, I would have thought.
It's good and you can make money. There's not many things you can do.
Well, yeah, I mean, the money, and that's great on top of it. But
yeah,
it's the fundamentals of any career, really, isn't it? But
yeah. Well, talk to me about this actually, because I do think you must have, you've not cracked it, but you've got a relatively young team in a lot of your back office team and that kind of thing. A lot of the people that I meet are very young, or not very young, but different generation to say you and I.
Yeah.
So what is it? Because I really struggle with trying to persuade the next generation, if you like, that this is a great gig, but it's going to take time. There's that kind of short-term gratification thing we get now. What do you think you're doing differently?
I think we talked about this when we were away. It's unbelievable how different people are.
Completely, and it's hard to get our heads around because we weren't like that.
Yeah,
so, you know what I mean?
I mean, there's no right or wrong with it. I think, it's a difficult one. But look, if I go back to my career, it's moved in so many different directions. You have to be patient, and I say that to my guys all the time. It's great that you want that success. It's great that you want that promotion here and there, but you have to work for it. And I think there can be a level of entitlement, which I don't remember ever.
And I'd also like to add that entitlement, I don't even think it's their fault. I just think it's how you've been brought up on a generation of 30-second reels showing you how successful people are in a really short space of time. So
I'll tell you one thing I will say. All the guys that come in, the younger guys that come for us, they're all so much more academically educated than Guy and I were, for example. Yeah. I mean, they all got good. They all did well at school. They all did well at college. They all pretty much got good degrees. If I look at not just in the underwriting and sales, most of them all come from a pretty solid background in terms of that. So I think I'm not saying there's a lack of discipline. It is different, but I don't think you can even, because I've not grown up in that. So I just don't. I just see it maybe slightly differently. I mean, how do you find it with your younger guys? Probably the same.
It's difficult. Yeah, we've had conversations, and I know that we are the dinosaurs in the sense that we have to change the way we recruit, because you can't just say I want more of you, and I can't just those sales guys that were our age, they were hungry and driven, and they wanted to. People want different things now as well. So I do think we have to change and are constantly looking at actually what what motivates you, the younger generation, as opposed to when it was us. I mean, I was desperate to learn stuff anyway. I wanted to sit next to the best person, but I
Yeah.
also was very driven by money, and I wanted to be the best of that. But that's not necessarily a trait now that is in a lot of the next generation. They want other things. So I think people believe buy more into the vision now. I do think that's a real thing. I think people want to see the journey of a business, whereas before we didn't really care. We wanted to know how much we could make and where, what we could learn and kind of progressing ourselves. I do think that the benefit of the next generation is because they got more information. They are more interested in that side.
And there's a different learning capacity as well, because everything's more online. Everything's more internet driven. So they do things, I guess, slightly differently. I go back to I think I got my first phone when I was like 16, 17. And that was one of the small, the little Nokia things. One of those snake, or as Pete called it the other day, worm. Snake. So we didn't have that. So it was all about picking up the phone. You didn't have text. You didn't. So if you look at this, you look even at trading floors in the 80s, 90s. It's boom, boom, boom. It's phone. So you're driven into thinking that way. I do think the generations coming through are more driven by that sort of online approach, which again isn't a bad thing. But I think
no. But does that mean we have to change the way? Because I think pick up the phone, right? That's just my nature. Pick up the phone. And I think you're trying to teach the next generation of it. But they're also picking up the phone to people that don't want to speak on the phone. So we changing. Do you know what I mean? And we're trying to force our sales teams into changing to be us, when actually it's the people they're selling to are potentially not as open to pick up a call that we want.
Any business, whatever you're doing, your clients are your customers. So your customer service has to be your number one priority, right? And for me, relationships are built either face to face or over the phone.
Yeah.
You can't build, you can maintain relationships online, emails, things like that. But I think, that's the sort of sales piece in me. I've always picked up the phone, and I think a lot of our sales, we've got an amazing sales team. I mean, they're so good, all of them. And, they're all very phone sort of driven because that's their job. There's lots of other people in the business that probably don't need to do that as much. But, I think if everyone's got in mind that, it's no different to working in a shop and someone walking in, that's your customer. Yeah. So I go back to that whole customer's always right thing. That's applied in any business. It doesn't matter what the business is. And so for me, one thing I do sort of talk to the guys about a lot is internal and external communication. Communication within a business is again, it's a massive part of it. But like I say, I'm not here to say right or wrong. Everyone, and I agree.
It's a really interesting. I know we chewed the cud on it before, didn't we? It's just it's a hard one. Like you say, there's no right answer. Cool, nailed it. This is the answer. This is how you train the next generation, because we don't know what's next. Like you say, no one knows what it's going to look like in the next 5 years. So
no, exactly. And a great example of that is if I go into work and I can't work my screen which is pretty much every day because I'm so useless. It's one of the young ones that comes over and goes, I'll do it. And so there's technical advantages to that. But it's a bit like you go up to the next generation. My dad can't even turn on a phone. Literally useless. You think about how we thought we're sort of technical.
Yeah, we're tech savvy. Then all of a sudden,
and then you meet the next generation.
Basically, just become their dad. Everyone just becomes their dad.
What's that?
Everyone just becomes their dad. Now I'm used to it, so I thought I was good at it.
Don't take it, please. That's so grumpy. No, but no, it's true, and I think it just gets more and more advanced, doesn't it? So, but look, we don't just hire young people. Obviously, I think there's certain sectors of the business that attract younger people. Underwriting, for example, it's a very young. There's a lot of young people
in your business, but not as an industry, not as a whole as an industry. That's what I mean. That's why it's quite interesting.
Yeah. So I think underwriting. Look, we've also brought on a lot of young people in treasury, within finance, within compliance, and all these things as well.
Yeah.
You tend to get the sales. You tend to get a slightly older, more mature. Because
I think sales is the problem. Obviously you've got a couple of young rising stars at your place, but at the same time. The average, like what the average BDM is about 50 now. They
Yeah,
can't, it's unsustainable. And then there's a gap.
yeah.
There is a big skills gap where we're not bringing through enough youngsters, and that's partly on us because we know that the system works. You know that you can bring in someone who's done it, and 5 years experience is going to work. But at the same time, you've got to get some new blood in. Otherwise,
Oh, I agree.
it's going to 20 years.
Yeah, I agree. Well, we've got obviously, yeah, sort of couple mid-30s. One obviously one a bit older, and obviously, as you know, recently we've obviously bringing Charlie on, who's obviously 27. But I agree with you. I mean, we had a load of CVs through, and there was no one really. I think there was one other guy that was sort of mid-20s but didn't have a lot of experience. But it's hard to find a young, experienced salesperson, especially someone that you know is going to be able to compete with the other guys as well. In terms of levels of business.
Yeah, and I had the same conversation.
It is, and it's knowledge as well. Right?
Yeah, it's tricky.
It's knowledge as well because you.
Well, this is the trouble. We need to bring in young people, but everyone wants a young person with 5 years' experience, which they don't have.
Exactly.
The constant battle of someone's got to put their hand in their pocket and give the patience and the time and stuff to train new people. But it's not a proven. Everyone understands that takes deep pockets and patience. When actually you can plug and play someone who does it now. So I do understand the dilemma that businesses face.
Yeah.
I haven't got the time and the money. I'd love the time and the patience and stuff to train loads of new people, but it's not realistic. Sometimes I have to take on experienced recruiters because they get to the start line quicker.
But look, again, I think that's where personality comes through. You've got charisma, personality, drive, passion, because technically anyone can learn. You give them time and you give them the platform, and you're there to help them. That they'll learn and they'll progress. But personality is you are who you are technically, and going back to the guys we brought in, and even linking into the culture of Glenhawk, everyone that we brought in they're very outgoing, which a lot of salespeople are, but also they have a lot of charisma. People want to be around them.